Hey guys, in today's video I want to show you this powerful solo heavy attack sorcerer build I've been using to solo hard mode veteran dungeons. You can also use it to solo world bosses, Harrowstorms, dragons, etc. And this build absolutely obliterates them, because it was made for soloing dungeons, which are far more difficult than any overland content. Some of the hardest dungeons I managed to solo with this build are Unhallowed Grave hard mode and Depths of Malathar hard mode. And you can find both of these videos on my YouTube channel. The build is also on my website, so if you prefer written guides over YouTube videos, you can read it there instead. The link will be in the description. In this guide, I'll be regularly using the terms regular and difficult. Regular refers to content that is intended to be soloed, such as Maelstrom Arena or Vateshran Arena, and to any overland content, such as world bosses, Dolmens, dragons, Volcanic Vents, Harrowstorms, Mirrormoor Incursions, etc. Difficult refers to soloing 4-man content, such as dungeons. But even then, some of the easier dungeons would fall under the regular category. The line between regular and difficult isn't very rigid though. If you're struggling with a world boss, you can't just use the difficult skill and gear setups, which will have better survivability at the cost of having less damage. So let's start with skills. This is the regular skill setup. The first skill is Ulfsil's Contingency, with the shock damage, Gladiator's Tenacity, and Force combination on it. Since Ulfsil's Contingency is a Mage's Guild skill, it's going to trigger the Might of the Guild passive, granting us Empower for 10 seconds, which is crucial for any heavy attack build, because it increases heavy attack damage by 70%. Next skill is Hurricane, our source of Major Resolve, which is a massive damage reduction buff. On top of that, it deals decent damage and grants 15% movement speed, which is going to synergize with our Banner Bearer skill, which I'll talk about later. Next is Crystal Weapon. This skill is very nice to weave between our heavy attacks, and if you cast it just as your heavy attack cast is finishing, it's going to do the first hit instantly. It's also going to increase our critical chance by proccing the Exploitation passive. In any fight that is even remotely difficult, you should replace this skill with Hardened Ward, a massive damage shield that will also heal you since we're not using any permanent pets. Next is Critical Surge, our source of Major Brutality and Sorcery, and an extremely strong heal that, combined with Ring of the Pale Order, will passively keep your health bar full, as long as you're doing damage. Next is Banner Bearer. Since heavy attack builds rarely struggle with sustain, we can get away with using Banner, which guards your sustain, but provides massive buffs. We're going to use the Magic, Cavalier's Charge, and Savagery Prophecy combination on it. The Cavalier's Charge script will synergize with Hurricane and Celerity Champion Point. As for Frontbar Ultimate, we're going to slot Power Overload, though we won't be using it most of the time. It's there to trigger the Expert Mage passive, which increases weapon and spell damage by 2%, and it's an emergency ultimate. Ideally, we want to use the Bugbear ultimate whenever it's possible, but Power Overload can sometimes come in handy when you need to very quickly burst some enemy down. Like, let's say you screwed up your rotation and you clearly aren't going to kill the Auroran that's about to reach Symphony of Blades. Just pop Power Overload and use just a tiny bit of ultimate to finish the job, instead of spending 170 ultimate on the big Atronach. If you don't want the emergency option, then you can slot Flawless Dawnbreaker, which will passively provide 1% more weapon and spell damage, with the Slayer passive, than Power Overload would with the Expert Mage. Moving on to Bugbear. First we have Bound Aegis, a skill that will passively grant us 8% max magicka, minor resolve and minor protection. It can also be activated to increase our block mitigation by 40%, so if you want to make use of that, you should swap it around with Critical Surge, so it's on your front bar, because otherwise it will be hard to react to incoming heavy attacks with a Bugbear skill, although I've rarely found it useful. Majority of the times, dodge rolling is still the better option, and having Critical Surge on front bar provides 2% weapon damage through the Expert Mage passive. Next skill is Soul Burst with the shock damage, Lingering Torment, and Courage combination on it. Nothing about this skill is really crucial, it's just a nice dot with a 215 weapon damage bonus slapped on top of it. I've tested many different options and this simply performed the best DPS wise. Next we have Elemental Susceptibility, an extremely loaded ability that does a multitude of things. First of all, it's completely free to cast, so it helps us sustain. Second, it applies Major Breach, which reduces enemies' armor by 5948, which is a massive damage increase. And third, it applies Burning, Chilled, and Concussed stats effects at the beginning and then every 7.5 seconds. All of these stats effects deal decent damage, but Concussed will also apply minor vulnerability for 4 seconds, increasing enemies' damage taken by 5%. And Chilled will also apply minor maim for 4 seconds, reducing enemies' damage done by 5%. The Concast proc will also synergize with our next ability. Elemental Blockade will constantly apply our Backbar enchant, in this case the weapon damage enchantment. It will also constantly apply off balance to enemies who are concussed, and they will be concussed thanks to elemental susceptibility. Off balance is important because it increases enemies' damage taken from heavy attacks, and doubles the amount of resources restored by those heavy attacks. And last regular ability on our Backbar is once again Banner Bearer, because it has to be double barred. Our Backbar ultimate is always going to be Summon Charge Achonak. It's simply the strongest ultimate we have access to, for both AoE and single target. Now I'm gonna tell you what to change if you don't have access to scribing. Use Scalding Rune instead of Ulf's Contingency. Replace Banner Bearer with Camouflage Hunter and Barb Trap. You want both of these abilities on your front bar, so you'll have to move Critical Surge to backbar. Replace Soul Burst with Haunting Curse. Haunting Curse is something you want to have on your front bar for easy rotation, so swap it around with Hurricane. Now here's what changes when doing extremely difficult content. We'll need Revealing Flare on the front bar, so we're going to give up Soul Burst and move Critical Surge into its spot. Crystal Weapon is now always replaced by Hardened Word. There is also one change to scribing. On Banner Bearer, the magic damage changes to Mitigation. There is also a lot more situational stuff I have to mention for the difficult setup, because it will be crucial for solving the hardest DLC dungeons. On Ulf's Contingency, you can change the shock damage to Damage Shield. This is a rather big damage decrease, and you won't need it for every fight, but keep it in mind as an option. You can remorph Hurricane into Boundless Storm, for fights where you need to dodge roll a lot. Whenever you need more bar space for a situational skill, replace Frontbar Banner Bearer with Camouflage Hunter, and replace Backbar Banner Bearer with the situational skill you need. Another way of gaining a skill slot for a situational skill is replacing Antelmir's Construct with Mighty Chudan, and ditching Hurricane. You can swap Bound Aegis and Hurricane around, for fights where you can make use of Bound Aegis's active block mitigation bonus. Ball of Lightning and Structured Entropy are very good situational skills for some fights. You can change the Cavalier Charge script on your Banner Bearer to War Mage's Defense, for fights where you need even more survivability, or whenever you ditch Hurricane or Boundless Storm, because then you won't benefit much from Cavalier's Charge anyway. Moving on to gear. This is the beginner setup made with only crafted sets, so you can easily buy them off of guild stores, or ask someone to craft them for you, or craft them yourself, if you've researched enough. The two 5-piece sets we'll want to use are Order's Wrath and New Moon Acolyte. Order's Wrath is just insanely powerful in general, and New Moon Acolyte will be powerful for us, because on a heavy attack build, we can handle its sustain debuff. On weapons, you'll want to use 2 pieces of the Assassin's Guile set, just to trigger the 2-piece critical chance bonus. It doesn't have to be Assassin's Guile, it could be any set with 2-piece crit chance bonus, but I'm showing Assassin's Guile here because it needs the lowest amount of research traits to craft. On the image, you can see that the traits are Training/Divines. Divines will make you stronger by increasing your crit chance, but if you're a new player, I think it's worth to sacrifice a tiny bit of power to get more experience gain, so you can level up faster. This is the regular gear setup. Sergeant Mail and Noble Duelist provide the best DPS increase for heavy attack builds. Antelmir is very easy to proc on a heavy attack build, deals decent damage, and also provides penetration, which we'll need. And Pale Order is just necessary to solo the most difficult stuff. You can replace Antelmir's Construct with Mighty Chudan when you need an additional skill slot, as I mentioned in the skill section. When doing that, you should also change the weight of your head or shoulder piece from medium to light, to make up for the lost penetration. And this is the gear setup for extremely difficult content. Olorim provides 430 weapon and spell damage, which is a lot, and it will provide us with the minor Aegis buff, reducing our damage taken by 5%. Just like in the regular setup, you can swap Antelmir to Chudan when needed. You can change some or all of the Magicka enchants to health enchants, for extremely difficult content. Moving on to champion points. In the blue tree you want to use Weapons Expert, which increases light and heavy attack damage by 20%, Deadly Aim, which increases single target damage by 6%, Fighting Finesse, which increases critical damage and healing by 8%, and Exploiter, which increases damage against off-balance enemies by 10%. In the red tree, you want to use Bond's Vitality, which increases your max health by 1400, Fortified, which increases your armor by 1731, Celerity, which increases your movement speed by 10%, and Rejuvenation, which increases all of your recoveries by 90. You should replace Rejuvenation with Bastion when using Hardened Word. When soloing extremely difficult dungeons, you should replace Exploiter and Fighting Finesse with 2 of the 4 mitigation slotables that match the fight's damage type, so Ironclad, Duelist Rebuff, Unassailable, and Enduring Resolve. Huge majority of the times, it's going to be Ironclad and Duelist Rebuff. Moving on to race. When it comes to solo PvE, you need both damage and survivability, so pretty much all races have useful ratios. The best race for dealing damage is Khajiit. While the critical damage from Feline Ambush can sometimes be wasted, due to critical damage being capped at 125%, it will never happen in solo content, because there will be no tanks or healers, providing you with the major force buff. The best race for survivability, and what I am using, is Nord. The Rugged Racial will provide around 6% damage mitigation. Moving on to Mundus Stone. For overland content, you should use the Thief Mundus, which increases your critical chance. For instance content, you should use the Lover Mundus, which increases your penetration. For extremely difficult dungeons, you should consider switching to the Lady Mundus, which increases your armor. Now attributes. For most content, you should put all 64 points into Magicka. For difficult content, you should devote as many attribute points as necessary to health. For some content, you'll be able to get away with 32 health, 32 Magicka. For the extremely difficult stuff, you'll need 64 health. Now food. You should use the Artium Pickled Fish Bowl food. If you need a cheaper alternative, Solitude Salmon Millet Soup provides only slightly lower stats. As for other options, Orzhorga's Tribe Trifle Pocket provides stamina recovery at the cost of maximum Magicka. It will lower your damage, but it's very useful for fights, where you have to dodge roll a lot. Orzhorga's Smoked Bearhound provides Magicka and stamina recovery at the cost of maximum Magicka. It will once again lower your damage, but it's very useful for fights where you have to both dodge roll a lot and spam your Hardened Word. Moving on to potions. Since your sustain is being taken care of by the fact that heavy attacks restore resources, you can instead use the armor potions, which will increase your armor by 5280. You can craft them by combining Baglos, Mountain's Flower, and Malkrab Chitin. In fights where you need to dodge roll a lot, you can use the Tri-Stat potions instead. You can craft them by combining Columbine, Baglos, and Mountain's Flower. Heroism potions are an expensive alternative to Tri-Stat potions. They provide minor heroism on top of the sustain. They're crafted by combining Dragonrium, Dragon's Blood, and Columbine. And that's it for this video. If you have any more questions, you can comment down below, or join our Discord server Wildheart. As always, feedback will be appreciated. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to my channel and check out my Twitch. Thanks for watching and see you next time.